Hello and a warm welcome to the South Asian Literature and Arts Festival, or SALA as it's popularly known, proudly produced by Art Forum SF. This festival is special because of you. You chose to be here to listen and to celebrate South Asian voices. A heartfelt thank you to all of our sponsors for making this Literature and Arts Festival a reality. Their dedication to supporting writers, artists, and the exchange of ideas keeps creativity alive in our community. Quick housekeeping rules: please silence your phones and no recording. Everything will be on YouTube so you can relive the brilliance at your own pace. Also, please make sure that you do not leave any belongings behind. There will be a 20-minute Q&A after the session, followed by book signing by all of the authors here in the courtyard outside. And lastly, as a volunteer-run organization, we at SALA are deeply grateful to all of our volunteers, without whose support none of this would be possible. So let's dive in, open our hearts and minds, and enjoy the stories that remind us that art connects us all. The topic of today's discussion is Tales That Transcend, Bridging Worlds Through Children's Literature, in which our keynote speakers, Dr. Shobha Tharoor Srinivasan, Padma Venkatraman, and Jyoti, Rajan, Gopal are in conversation with Amrita Gandhi. Amrita Gandhi is a television anchor, producer, and former travel show host who, when on the royal beat, visited dozens of palaces, staying as the house guest of royal families all over India. The palaces may have been big or small, famous or forgotten, but the people she met and the stories she heard were always larger than life. From her royal adventures sprung this book of children's fiction in the imaginary kingdom of Baghradu that she hopes will thrill and entertain young readers the world over. Amrita has a master's and bachelor's degree in anthropology from the UK and lives in San Diego, California with her family. And with that, let's welcome our panelists on stage.
Thank you so much for this introduction. It is definitely not supposed to run that long about me, but thank you. I'm here with three wonderful writers of children's literature, and as a first-time writer of children's literature, it's so exciting for me to be sitting with the three of you. I know I'm echoing a little, but that's just more like because I have such wisdom, it has to be amplified. So I wanted to start by saying that each of our writers here is more than anything else really prolific. Each of them has written several books, which probably totaled dozens. And I was really blown away to see the volume of work behind each of them, each of them sitting right here before me. This is just a tiny representation of some of their books, and many of them are available. Just a few of each of their books is, not all their titles, but many are available for you all to look at and hopefully pick up for your loved ones at home. There's so much I've learned about children's writings from each of you, and I'm going to start with you, Shobha. So I wanted to start by saying, so Shobha Tharoor Srinivasan is the author of several books, not just for children, but also for grown-ups. But what stands out to me about her is her play with words, where words themselves are an adventure. They're an adventure when they're read, and they're an adventure when they're spoken. And just a few of Shobha's titles include Let's Use Our Words, Time to Rhyme, Indie Alphabet, Prince with a Paintbrush about Rajan Ravi Verma. Shobha, one of the things that I heard about you, that you said about yourself that I loved, is that before you put something out there or send it to anybody, you read it out loud. Tell us why you read out loud what you write.
I love the sound of words. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I know it's extremely warm. Yesterday they had air conditioning in this room, and when I found out this is where our panel was, I was really excited. I said, well, maybe everyone will come looking for air conditioning. I like to read words out loud because, first of all, I like the sound of words, the musicality of it. I'm a voiceover talent, so that helps. But truly, I think for almost any writer, when you read aloud, you catch the errors in the sentences far better. So for me, if prose is clunky, if the sentence doesn't really work, I can catch it when I read it aloud. Sometimes when it's just on the computer screen or on a piece of paper, you miss that. So it's really important. And you know, children are, when you write for children, and I'm sure both of them are going to say the same thing, very, very discerning readers. And I've had the privilege of being on stage with writers who earn boku bucks and are really, really good writers who are, you know, selling a lot more books than I do. And they say, we've just turned to children's writing and it's so much harder to do. So even though when I'm at a literary festival and it feels like we never get invited to as many because we're children's writers, truly it's quite an art, and it is, reading aloud is just one example of it. It's important. If it doesn't work when I read it aloud, the sentence, because I've used a word that could have been changed, it's got to ring, it has to relate to the reader. And you know, what we are doing is such a huge responsibility, because children are the future leaders, they're the stewards of our planet, they're what they read today. The only way we can raise global citizens is if we can raise global listeners and global readers. So it's equally important. And I know this seems like a long answer, but I essentially read aloud because I just think that I can catch the musicality of a sentence structure much better if it's read aloud. But it's also the importance of how we write.
Thank you, Shobha. I'm going to come back to you with more questions after because of what you said. But now I want to introduce our next author here on stage, Jyoti, Rajan, Gopal. So excited to have had the chance to have met you over the past 2 days. Jyoti is not just a very prolific writer, she is also a kindergarten teacher. So she knows not just about literature that can come to children, but she knows about what children, but she receives from children as well. So she knows equally about children and how they read in the classroom. So Jyoti, I wanted to introduce a few of your works. And the thing to me that stands out about your works is that they talk a lot, they give me a sense of belonging, a coziness, and a sense of acceptance of who I am. And one of them that did that for me was called My Party's Sari, party being grandma, about this little boy who found refuge, not because he had anything to run away from, he had a very beautiful little life, but how he found so much abundance of love in his grandmother's sari cupboard. And I just felt enveloped when I read that book, and that's just one of your many books, including Desert Queen, which is also about acceptance and belonging over the mangroves, and many more. Jyoti, you know so much about kids. Why does belonging feel like a theme among all other themes?
Well, thank you first of all for having me here. I'm so excited to be at Sala and I'm a little starstruck at being on the stage with these three brilliant women. Thank you for having me. So I think the theme of belonging and community sort of permeates all my work. Firstly, because I grew up as a global citizen. I didn't grow up in India, I didn't grow up in America. I sort of straddled a lot of different worlds growing up. being an international student, and then I moved into this country, and then as a teacher, I saw my students experiencing that. Then I became a mom, and I saw my daughters experiencing that, but in a very different way than how I experienced it. And then I discovered the world of picture books, both as a teacher as a mom, and I realized what was missing in those spaces. And those were books that would give me a sense, and my daughters a sense, my students a sense of belonging belonging here. So I think because of how I grew up and how I straddled cultures, my writing tends to really incorporate themes of possibilities in belonging, joy in belonging, how do we straddle worlds with acceptance, while recognizing the challenges. And even though I write for children, I think that I hope that my books also reach the grown-ups who are reading them, because I sometimes feel like grown-ups forget that our children are straddling worlds, and that we can be a part of helping them to bridge those with more grace and less division. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you, Jyoti. I'll come back to you with something that that has been prompted by what you said. But now for Padma Venkatraman. Padma, again, is not a writer without being something that I was really excited to hear, an oceanographer. So Padma Venkatraman is writer, oceanographer, as you do. So I was like, wow. Now, first of all, a lot of kids like me, when they're like 8 or 9 or 10, and you're like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a marine biologist. I mean, pretty much, that's what I wanted to be. I'm nowhere near that. I'm literally like a mom with sunscreen by the beach with her children. But you went off and did it. And somewhere in your new book, called Safe Harbor, that both of those worlds, and you have many worlds, came together. And what I loved about Safe Harbor, which is also here, is that it talks about this young girl who's displaced from home for reasons outside of her control, and the a seal puppy that she rescues helps her to feel a sense of home. But what I liked the most about it was that less than the cultural assimilation that she had to do from the old world to this world was her struggle with her own mom's sense of personal well-being and the family struggle. And I feel that is universal. And you brought that in beautifully. So tell me about how your middle grade books, you write a lot of middle grade books, how that has come to be sort of your space in writing.
Can everybody hear me? Yeah, because sometimes if you sit at the back of the room and you can't hear somebody, that's like the worst thing, So if you stop hearing me, then please shout or something. Thank you all for being here. I've just felt such a sense of belonging this weekend, being with wonderful authors and being with just other brilliant people. I just feel so excited and happy and very much a sense of family. So thanks all of you for having me here. I should make sure that I answer that question. And one thing that I think is very, very important to me in all of my writing is that my writing is layered. So with Safe Harbor, for instance, you can look at it, if you like, and say it's about a girl, 2 immigrant children actually, who come across a seal that has been stranded with plastic wrapped around its neck on a beach in Rhode Island, and they save it. And you can say that that's what it is. It's an animal rescue story. And yes, it is. But all of my novels, starting from my first one, Climbing the Stairs, which came out about actually more than 17 years ago, because my daughter is now 17, so it's almost 20 years ago that novel came out, is very multi-layered. And I think that's something that is critical to me. So when we write for young people, if any of you are out there thinking that you're going to write for young people, please remember this. Young people are complex, they are intelligent, they are wonderful. And the best thing that you can do for them is to respect them and give them what they need with depth, with layers, and absolutely any excellent children's book should be a book that an adult will pick up. And hopefully, if the adult is as astute a reader as a child, will also absolutely enjoy it and see the layers and see that appreciation, because every book for children is, unfortunately or fortunately, going to be read by adults along the way as well, because they are ultimately the gatekeepers. So I think that's very important to me. Another thing that has always been important to me in my work are things that we don't necessarily talk about too much in the Desi community, things that we might feel uncomfortable about. And with Safe Harbor, one of the things that was just vital for me to bring out is mental health. And it's not just the Desi community. Everywhere, people have a lot of difficulty actually speaking about mental health issues. And especially in children's literature, one excellent way some authors think, I don't agree, to get rid of an adult so that the kids become the main, sort of the spotlight focuses on the kids, is to give one of the adults a mental health problem, usually depression, and then they check out, and the adult is blamed. And this is not just a long time ago, this is something that continues in books that I have reviewed for the New York Times even today. So it is something that really upsets me, in part because we have bipolar, whatever you call it, people with bipolar conditions in my family, and I have suffered depression. I live with depression. So it's maybe something that I went through, and it was a difficult thing for me at one point in my life, but I've also been able to live with it. I like to think, you have to ask my daughter, she might have a different opinion, but I think I'm a fantastic mom, even though I have depression, right? And perhaps because I have depression. So that was one thing that was very important for me to bring out. And the fact that we have loving families. We always like to say Desi families are loving and large and all of this, and sure we are. We also have a lot of not so loving elements. And I think it was important for me to bring out that complexity as well.
Thank you so much, Padma. I just wanted to show, just sort of hand each of you some of the books so people can have a sense of it. So here's Safe Harbor that we just talked about. I will hand Shobha this one, and also the Ravi Verma book, and Time to Rhyme, and The Power, and Jyoti, Power of the Name, of Your Name. Great. Just so that we can just have a sense of the books, because we weren't able to put them out. We also have Over in the Back Row here by Jyoti. We have another one called A Time to Dance by Padma, and we have a really fabulous one here called In the Alphabet by Shobha. On all of these books, it's closed. All of these here we can find outside, and The Bridge Home. Okay. I wanted to just ask round two questions based on what we discussed. Shobha, you were talking about words, right? And how you just like the musicality of them. Now, when you come from a family that has a lot of words at your disposal, one of the challenges would be to expect, and you would probably do that, you clearly do that well because you care about how your words sound, is to write simply. It's hard to have a lot of economy with words and use the words that get the point across in the most contemporary, in the best way right now. When you have so many words you can use, you're basically like discarding most of the words you know. So how do you write simply when you've got so many words?
I'm going to respond to this in a different sort of way. My books have all been very different. So I have written picture books, and picture books are limited, and technically they cannot be more than 1,000 words. They need to be illustrated on every page. The illustrations are something that children should be able to follow along and get the narrative arc by just looking at the pictures. But as you said as well, most books are first curated by a parent or an adult who's bought the book for the child. So you don't want the book, you want the book to last and endure and be interesting to the adult reader as well as the child. Now, I talked about sound, so my picture books, I have 3 picture books. This one is written in rhyme, in quatrains, because when it's a picture book, it is truly the sound of a rhyme scheme that the children first hear, the babies, the little ones that are being read to, even the toddlers. You pick up language skills by listening to the sound of words. Looking at pictures, they go back and they pick the books that they want to hear. Later they learn to read it themselves. So, you both said this in different ways. Children's books are not just a springboard for conversation, but also something that you can come to at every age. Even as a kindergarten teacher with picture books, when you come back, you discover something else about the book. So your life experiences, your reading brings something else into the book. Now I've digressed. You said, how do you keep the language simple? I'm going to say something really standard, which is that children, as I said, and we've all said, are very, very bright, and we don't want to come to them as though they can't understand. So even in my picture books, I have a beautiful picture book called Parvati the Elephant's Very Important Day, and it was published in India by HarperCollins. And it's an exquisite book, not because I've written it, but just beautifully illustrated, and it's a lovely book. But I've introduced quite a few what I would call definitely above the reading age words. Not to say that I know those words, but because I want children to go back to the book and pick up things. I've also introduced Malayalam words in the book, and it has a glossary at the end of the book, so that children from a different part of India who may be reading it, or in any part of the world where the book is, you can get it from Amazon here, will be able to pick up some new words. And if you describe it enough in the poem, and again that's a book written, a picture book again in rhyme, you'll be able to pick up the meaning of the words, both with the illustrations as well as with the context of the rhyme. So it's something aspirational, but it is something that you can go back to learn. Because I feel also, just as Padma said about her writing, I think all of us are working towards multi-levels. Picture books are not, they are picture books, you have to follow a convention, but there's something you can go back to later. An illustrated biography like this one, I have a double narrative. And the reason is, biographies, sometimes children have told me in schools they find it boring, it's dates, it's numbers, it's this, it's that, it's that kind of thing. You think of it as a history text. Well, this isn't. This was voted as the best book of the year by a group of children. It was a children's competition, and they'd read about 12 books, and they picked this one as their favorite book because they said they were surprised that they found it so exciting. And the reason is a very simple reason. I had a double narrative. I have a child inquiring and investigating Raja Ravi Verma's life. So the child has little comic bubbles, which of course I haven't drawn, the illustrator does that, but bubbles talking about, oh my gosh, Ravi Verma got married at 18 to a 12-year-old, I'm 8 years old, I couldn't have done that, that kind of thing. So what children are thinking of, dreaming of, have questions about, are all surfacing within the book. So I think that little technique of having the double narrative made the story that much more interesting to readers. Children who were reading, there is facts, there's obviously dates and there's illustrations. I started this book to introduce the art to readers because I discovered that so many children, both here and in India, did not know Ravi Verma. And he is still a beloved, he's one of India's first modern artists. He passed away over 160 years ago, but his art has informed comic book colors, calendars, all kinds of things, and people didn't recognize, Galaxy of Musicians or Jatayavad or any of his famous paintings, but if you ask them about Mona Lisa, they tell you who painted it. So I figured if we could write a book and have, since he passed away so long ago, his art is in the public domain, and therefore you can put his pictures into the book, which means kids can see it, read it, recognize it, and maybe one day they can say, that's Ravi Verma art, and it's that,
Thank you, Jyoti. Thank you, Shobha. And before I ask Jyoti her question, I wanted to ask you, I learned a new word, and you're going to be so mortified that I'm actually a writer and I didn't know what it meant from her latest book called Let's Use Our Words. How many of you know what a spoonerism is? Yay, not everyone does. Yay! Okay, so give us your favorite spoonerism and tell us just give us your favorite spoonerism.
So the difference between malapropism and spoonerism, my latest book, which is not here for sale, it was published just in August. It's available, I think, very soon on Amazon. But anyway, so malapropism is when you use a word incorrectly, use the wrong word. In spoonerism, let me give you an example, then you can understand the meaning better. Let's say, funny bone, I hit my funny bone and it's tingling. If you said bunny phone, that would be spoonerism. And there was a man called Archibald Spooner who was a vicar or somebody, one of those people in a church where he used to evidently speak like that all the time, and so they called it spoonerism, and it came from that Archibald Spooner. And so there's, let me think, can anybody throw out a good spoonerism? I know funny bones is one. I wrote a poem about it, and I'm blanking out now. Jelly beans, bunny jeans, people do crazy
when you
things.
Mix words
So it doesn't really make any sense.
Okay, you
Whereas malapropism is when you use the wrong word. And I remember there was a book after George Bush the first, when he was no longer the president, not first, the second. When he was no longer president, they had brought out a whole book called Bushisms. And his Bushisms were all actually hilariously malapropisms, right? So,
Thanks,
different.
Shobha.
Okay.
That's great. So, Jyoti, I want to ask you a words-related question, actually, because you are a kindergarten teacher. We're all, I grew up with a dictionary. Then later on, I would because I couldn't be bothered to carry one to work, because I wrote also as part of my work, I would just go to thesaurus.com online. Now people don't even do that. Kids don't need to do that. Are you finding that writing and words and the dictionary is something that, beyond just kindergarten, is it something that was very important to me growing up? Because when I opened it, I remember this Random House Dictionary was so giant. When I opened it, I would see other words that I wasn't looking for, right? Not just the word I was actually looking for. So then I could have stumbled upon other words. So now, without the dictionary being something that people physically carry around, will our kids just be less creative with their words as they go through school?
That's a huge question. Well, I can only speak from my own experience as a kindergarten teacher and as a mom. So in my classroom, we always kept dictionaries because it was one of the favorite books that my students had. They loved the dictionary. And the fatter and the smaller the words, the more they loved it. Because it was a grown-up book. And they could flip through it, and they could look through the words, and whether they were reading or not, they were usually doing it with friends, and we would have different kinds of dictionaries. Personally, and we have dictionaries in our house still. We still have the big tomes that our daughters used to use, and I will never give those away, and a thesaurus. So no, I don't. I hope they don't go away, because, and I do think teachers should keep physical dictionaries in the classroom, of all kinds, not just one, because kids really do love them. They love looking for words, they love wordplay. You know that very well because you write that way. And as a writer, for a lot of my stories, I will use dictionaries and thesauruses to sort of start thinking about what are the words that I want to use for a particular story. So for example, for The Power of Your Name, which is all about, it's an ABC book that talks about where our names come from and how powerful they are and how they were a gift and the many different ways that we can sort of sing an ode to names. Well, my name is Jyoti, it's been mangled all my life. And then, so as a kindergarten teacher, I saw how my students' names were also mangled. And so for me, this is an important book. But when I was writing this book, I was collecting. I'm a word collector. I was collecting words that I wanted to use in this book. What were the words that I was going to use that were going to create this image, this praise poem that I was envisioning of names? And so I just collect words. And then once I have that big collection, that sort of gets me into the mood of oh, this is the way the story is going to go. This is the way this is going to write itself. And then I start figuring out which of those words I want to use. what word associations might come in, and incorporating that into my work. So a dictionary and a thesaurus are hugely important in the work that I do, whether it's online or in hard copy.
I absolutely
Yeah.
love that, because I really thought that they were going to go away forever. So Padma, I wanted to ask you a bit more about this whole oceanography business, just because I just find it amazing, because another thing about kids is what do you want to be? They want to be everything. And I know now they can, and they don't need to choose. And at least for me growing up, choosing what I wanted to be was also part of creating my identity. And so if my sister wanted to do that, I couldn't do the same thing because I was copying her. So those things really traumatized me. Like, what am I going to be that no one else has already taken? But you're a writer and an oceanographer, so things are changing now. Kids can be so many things. And you've done both. One is science, the other is literature. How did you come to be an oceanographer? And also a prolific writer.
I'm not so sure that my agent and my editor would agree that I'm prolific, but thank you. All right. One of the things that was very important to me, so when I was growing up in India, which was several years ago, more years ago than I like to admit, you can see my white hair. I was raised with the idea that there would be certain decisions that would be made by my parents and my family for me. And I knew quite young that I was quite a stubborn little kid with my own views, and that I wanted to just make the decisions about my own life. And I realized that one of the most important things to be able to make the decisions about your own life is that you have to be able to stand on your own 2 feet and be financially independent. And luckily for me, I understood somehow that authors were not necessarily it isn't a very secure profession at all. So, one of my books, yeah, absolutely, and The Bridge Home sold over, I think it's close to now 500,000 copies, and now you would think that that would just mean, whoa, that's fantastic, and my next book should then, I don't know, at least start off at 500,000 and then sell 1 million or something, and that is not the case at all. So there is no guarantee. It's up and down and up and down and up and down. And so I also absolutely loved science and mathematics. And Amrita wrote a beautiful piece on our panel. And I gave her a quote about how much mathematics also means to me, and how there's always this connection, right? Especially in the West, people know mathematics and music, there is this connection. And when you write good literature, at its best, it sings. And so to me, there is something very musical, but there's also something very mathematical about writing beautifully. And so I think I realized that I wanted to do that, and I was very much into social justice ever since I was a little kid. Social justice is a theme in all of my writing, and it was a theme for my life as an oceanographer. So within the grand field of oceanography, I decided that I wanted to look at pollution-related issues. And so when I did it, of course, there were hardly any women. So most of the time when I did it, I was the only female, the only person of color, and at one point, the boss of the research vessel. Yeah. And so that was very nice. I was also the only person under 6 feet tall, the only person at that point that did not speak German as a native language.
I'd now like to go, Jyoti, Shobha, Padma, to each of you to read a piece from one of your works that you choose to.
Sure.
We'd love to just hear some of their language and their beautiful words.
Okay, so I'm going to start at the letter C. And let's see, I'm going to need my glasses. And please bear with me because I'll have to put the book down to turn the pages, but I feel like you need to see the pictures too. The illustrations are by Olivia Sua, who uses paper cut. As her medium is paper cut work, and they're absolutely spectacular. Okay. Your name is a celebration. The sound of welcome, glowing, fizzling, popping, the day you were born. It is a declaration, short as a one-word poem or long as a sweep of stairs to the stars. Your name says, this is me. Your name is electricity, a crackle and a sizzle in your very cells, the snap pop of your essence, your presence, your superpower. It is a feast, flavored, a spicy lilt, a sweet caress, lemony, melony, buttery, fluttery, a blessing of cadence and flow. Your name is a gift, plucked from your family tree with roots that meander or twine or burrow deep, air, water, earth, sky. Hope lives in every name, prayers sung, dreams hung, plans strung for happy, healthy, heartful days.
Really loved it.
Thank you, Jyoti. Shobha, please.
And it's ingenious. It's using the alphabet, it's introducing vocabulary, it has music.
Layers.
And such a lovely,
Layers. As Padma said, layers.
I really loved it, thank you. This is a poetry book. It's called It's Time to Rhyme. This particular book is the Indian edition. It was published first in the United States and was called How Many Lines in a Limerick. They don't have copies of that one, but they have copies of this one for sale. I'm actually very proud of this book because it does something a little unusual. I'm going to take a minute just to explain it. It's a book of poetry. It's a poetry reader that introduces 9 different poetic forms. And we start with simple things like a limerick and haiku. A haiku is a 3-line poem I'm sure everybody knows it. We have a little bit more complicated forms like a villanelle. We have a sonnet. And what I do is I introduce the poetic forms in the form of the poem. So, for instance, a sonnet, and I won't read you that particular poem, which is called Sonnet in Iambic Pentameter, but it says a sonnet is an interesting poem, and I'm not meant to read it that way, but it's an iambic pentameter, so we have the da-dum beat of it. It's 10 beats to a line, and it's 5 long beats. So a sonnet is an interesting poem, its length is not a matter of your choice, and it goes through introducing an octave and a sestet. It changes the voltas when it changes from octave to sestet. It's an Elizabethan sonnet, so it ends with a couplet. So you think, oh my gosh, there's all of this learning. Well, that's in some ways the sort of pedantic aspect of the book. But what makes this book a little bit more fun is that kids are not going to just want to learn, how to write a sonnet, unless they discover that a sonnet can also be fun. And as I say when I go into classrooms, is that we can write sonnets about anything. You can write about your best friend, you can write about chalk or cheese or your favorite food or your teacher, all kinds of things that could be exciting to you. So I wrote a sonnet called When Mummy Was Away. And I'm going to read that to you. And when you read it, only because it follows the sonnet, we know that it's a sonnet. But otherwise, it's just a poem about when Mummy was away. And that's what gets the kids excited. So when I do a poetry workshop, we talk about a haiku or an acrostic or some of the simple forms, and then we work through it and write those poems. So I'm going to just read you just one poem, okay? It's called When Mummy Was Away. Sorry, just a second. Here we are. I packed my own lunch when Mummy was out, with sweets and treats since she wasn't about. Took out the salad, threw carrots away, put in some cookies, a packet of Lay's, filled up my thermos with sweet 7-Up, joyfully dreaming of fizz in my cup. Pulled out my sandwich, added some cake. This was a great lunch, I made no mistake. But something went very wrong with my plan. You don't want to look in the garbage can. Through recess, I lay on the ground in pain. I'll never try packing my lunch again. All that sugar gave me a tummy ache. Junk food for lunch is a major mistake. Just bringing poetry back to kids.
Fantastic.
And they do like it, even though they start out saying it's full of rules, it's full of form and meter, and what is all that? We don't like poetry, just like they say they don't like math until they actually do it and they love it.
The trick is to teach them that in the structure is freedom.
Yeah.
Like there is freedom in that structure. And how do they find it?
Padma, what can you read for us?
Yeah, I am going to read to you from The Bridge Home, in part because Shobha made me laugh, and I was thinking about the fact that The Bridge Home is about it's about two girls who run away from home because of abuse. They end up on the streets of India, and this is based on a true story. So it sounds, and it is, a very serious topic. But it is also a topic that made people, the way that it is written, there is a lot of joy in it, and there are a lot of funny moments in it, because I had a very difficult childhood, and the reason that I'm still here with all of you today is because I was able to laugh. And I was able to see that my troubles were, sure, they were bad, but there was also there was a lot worse that could happen, and one of the worst things that could happen was if I fell prey to my own difficult life and sat there and did nothing about it. So I'm going to read to you from The Bridge Home also in part because this book was recently challenged. I don't know if you know this, but in America right now, we are having an exponential number of challenges and book banning, and that is going on in every state, including in blue states, and it has gone up a tremendous amount, and I could talk about that for like 5 hours. I won't. But the fact that this book was recently challenged in Massachusetts by a family that said just because there's a Christian kid in it, and sure, this Christian kid says things, and then there are other kids in it who are not Christian at all, that this was not okay because how dare I portray a Christian kid in India. So I was shocked that the challenge would come from a Desi family. And I am Hindu, by the way. But I certainly think that it's very important. It was very important for me, I think subconsciously, to show, and it always has been, that for a very long time in the Indian subcontinent, we had a wonderful amount of religious acceptance. And I sincerely hope that that will always be part of our culture that we value and we continue. The book came to me as the voice of one sister speaking to another sister, and I knew the girls loved each other very much, and I could not tell why they were apart, and I wrote the book to find out. Togetherness. Talking to you was always easy, Ruku, but writing's hard. Write her a letter, Selina auntie said, laying a sheet of paper on the desk. Paper remade from wilted, dirty, hopeless litter that had been rescued, scrubbed clean, and reshaped. Even the pencil she gave me was made from scraps. You really like saving things, don't you? I said. Crinkly lines softened her stern face. I don't like giving up, she said. She rested her dark hand, warm and heavy, on my shoulder. Why should I write? I said. It's not like you have her address. I believe your words will reach her, Selina auntie said. We're opposites, I said. You believe in everything and everybody. You're full of faith. Yes, she said, but you're full too. You're full of feelings you won't share and thoughts you won't voice. She's right about that. I don't talk to anyone here any more than I have to. The only person I want to talk to is you, Ruku. Maybe writing to you is the next best thing. If you could read my words, what would you want me to tell you? I suppose you'd like to hear the fairy tale I made. every night we huddled together on the ruined bridge. The story that began with, once upon a time, two sisters ruled a magical land, and ended with, Viji and Ruku, always together. That story was made up, of course. Not that you'd care whether it was true or not. For you, things were real that the rest of us couldn't see or hear. When I finished the story, you'd say, Viji and Ruku, together, always. I was confident. Our togetherness was one of the few things I had faith in. Get your copy.
Thank you so much, Padma. Thank you, Shobha. Thank you, Jyoti. I would love to open it out to the audience now if you have questions for our three writers on stage.
Hi. I have a question for you. Padma, I think you said you write for middle schoolers. I feel like I'm loud enough, so. I can sit in the back. This way? Okay. I just heard you. Oh, yeah. So, is it a little dark for middle schoolers?
Okay, so I'll tell you what. I will tell you something that I hope will make I'll answer your question with a story. Super Bowl Sunday last year, there was this mom who wrote to me, and she sent me a picture of her little boy. And first I didn't understand exactly why, but then she said this to me, right? She said that, and by the way, if there are any football fans here in the audience, those are the mom's words, okay, not mine. But she said that on a day when half the population of America at least, she said, if not more, was hooked to a gladiator-like sport, she suddenly noticed that her little boy was not there. And in the room. So she was like a little worried. She went looking for him, and she clicked this photograph of him. He was sitting actually somewhere in California. He had this like blanket on top of him. He was sitting and reading a book. And she said when she saw him, she got really worried because he was sobbing. And she went there, and the book he had in his hands was my book, Born Behind Bars. And Born Behind Bars is about a child who was born in jail in India. And they forgot about it and they threw away the key. And by the way, this is not something that only happened to one child. It's something that happens to kids in this country as well today. And as we all know, I'm sure in this room, it happens much more to people with darker skin. So if you are black, you're much more likely to have that sort of unjust thing happen to you, and you're much more likely to have your parents be unjustly incarcerated. Anyway, so she saw this kid reading this book, was very worried, then started reading the book with him. And then she said to him something that I wish I could tell every parent in the entire world. And she said, Padma, I told my son, there is no need to worry about tears because what you're feeling right now is empathy. And empathy is a superpower, she told him. And that is the superpower that I hope my words will unlock all the time, because I have had death threats and I always think to myself, something that somebody told me that I should never say, but so I'll try to say it carefully. I will say this. You can do what you want for me, but my books are already there doing things that you cannot stop.
Yes. And children are not stupid. They know what's going on in the world. They see injustice, they understand fear, there are things that are scary, but I think books like Padma's and Shobha's, and hopefully mine, will allow them safe spaces to explore and dive into and have opportunities where they can have those conversations with you, develop empathy, learn more, and I think that's important. Like, we can't cushion children, but we can give them an opportunity to have those conversations in safe spaces, and books are those safe spaces for those conversations to happen.
And
I
read the
highly
books.
encourage-
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry?
No, I was just going to jump in after you finished. No.
No, I'm done.
Oh, the only thing I was going to say is, like, please read books with your kids too. I mean, the other, when you were talking about dictionaries, Jyoti, I was thinking about this. Like, have dictionaries in your houses, people, and like, don't read books on the phone for God's sake. I mean, really, like, have real books in your house. If you want your kids to get off the screen, then please show it to them by modeling it. Like, our kids will never listen. In fact, they won't listen. If you say, like, do something, they're not going to listen to you. That is the nature of things. I did the same thing to my mom and my parents, okay? So, the thing is though, what you do, your children see that.
Absolutely.
And most of the time, they do, whether they like to or not, model that behavior. That's why, unfortunately, if you have parents who behave badly, sometimes we repeat those behaviors ourselves, even though we don't want to, right? But if your parents are doing good things, like reading books, which are physical, your kids will love them. I mean, give them books when they're little, for heaven's sakes, when they're tiny. There are books that they can hold and read. And if you show them those books, and if you love those books, and if you engage with them, and you read those books in a fun way, they will love books too.
Absolutely.
I think we have time for another question.
Thank you, such a great session. I remember when I first read my non-kids book, it was Rider Haggard's King Solomon's Mines, and I became a big fan of Alan Quatermain. I was wondering if you as panelists remember the first time you read a book which was not a quote-unquote children's book. I had an older brother, so I was reading what he was reading, so it was easy for me.
Well, there's a book I talk about all the time, if I may just answer this quickly. I read General Durrell's My Family and Other Animals, and I'm always trying to tell kids to read that book. I read it, I think, in 7th or 8th grade, and it was interesting. It was sort of an extra reading session, and I still remember I learned the word pusillanimous from that book. And pusillanimous means cowardly. I still remember that. I know how to spell it because I didn't know the meaning of the word, even though I sort of guessed it from reading the book. And then I looked it up and I wrote it down and I learned it. And I love the sound of that word as well because it's sibilant and it's long and it's multisyllabic. But there you are. So I remember that. I mean, it's a hilarious book. It's a wonderful book. It's a delightful book on many levels. But I also remember the word I learned from it. So yes, I remember that. I mean, other than, of course, as teenagers in India, we all grew up reading Mills and Boon until you discover that the same dark, tall man is in every story and then you give it up. So that was a particular era. They like the Harlequin romances here. I swiftly moved to Russian literature and Japanese literature and all of that later, but there was a time we read that too.
Did you want that from all of us? Or?
I would love to hear from all of you if there's time.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. So, of course, I grew up with the Enid Blytons and the Tinkles. But away from children's books, my first one was with my third grade teacher, Mr. Izal, at Jakarta International School. At the end of the day, would read to us chapters of A Watership Down by Richard Adams. Every day. And it remains my favorite book to this day. It's like a thing for me to read it once a year. And when my daughters became old enough for me to be able to read the story to them, I read it to them, even though they were at that point old enough totally to read it by themselves. I read it to them every day, chapter by chapter, because it held such a powerful, it's a great story.
My mic wasn't taken away, but maybe it should have been. But I will tell you this. I started reading Shakespeare actually when I was very young. And it, that whole like Julius Caesar, that ghostly scene where she says, the Julius Caesar's wife has this like dream about what's going to happen to him, and it is freaky. And at least it freaked me out when I was a kid. Okay, I used to have like nightmares, but I went back to it and I read it again and again. And there were like a whole lot of like dramatic speeches. So I realize now in retrospect that was probably a book for adults. The other book that made a huge impression on me actually was. Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. It's a horrible, racist piece of literature that is so exquisitely and beautifully written. And it drove me nuts because the language was like music and so beautiful, and the content was horrifying. Yeah, if you haven't read it, it's not worth reading, I don't think. But it's a book that basically it turns the entire continent of Africa into the backdrop for one white man's descent into insanity.
I'd love to thank each of our amazing panelists.
Thank you, Amrita.
Thank you. We thought Shobha's literature was just a little bit of fun and games. It's so much deeper. It matters to all of us because it sets the tone and the seeds for all of our minds and our hearts, and brings us back to empathy, brings us back to our love of language, and brings us back to our love of ourselves. So thank you to each of our panelists, and thank you to all of you for being here. Thank you, everyone. Yes, I would love to say that all these books that we've shown you are available and our 3 authors are available signing these books for the next 20 minutes. So please go get them while they're here.